Good evening. I hope the sound is okay. If someone could just let me know that it's coming through clear enough, and loud enough for you all. Um, Today we're going to do an update on what's been going on with the Danny Masterson trial. It's been months now since the retrial. It was first scheduled to start. The mistrial happened, and it was supposed to reschedule the retrial at the end of March. It's been moved forward to April. It was currently scheduled for April 11th until yesterday's actual motions and hearing results in pretrial motions and conferences. Judge Charlene Olmedo, we're going to continue with the same judge, of course, did go over quite a few of the motions from the prosecution and of the defense. There was a lot in that conference the other day. The last few days have been a bit busy. The first thing you may have seen in the media that I would like to address is that Leah Remini was in the conference in hearing for a while in the beginning of the week. She was there to support one of the Jane Does who was bringing forth information to the court of harassment that was going on before, during, and after the trial, the mistrial. This is important information for the court to have, that there is harassment still going on. The judge did hear from both sides on it, and Leah was just there for support. And afterwards, because the hearing was not going to be just about that, she left with the Jane Doe that was there in support. They all left together after hearing that part of the conference that was going on. And just to jump forward a little bit, Judge Almeida has said that information in regards to harassment in regards to this particular case in Scientology will be allowed in the next trial. They will be able to speak on it. Now, I want to first do a shout out to Tony Ortega, who again is in the courtroom every day, who has tirelessly followed this case and many other Scientology cases, information, and everything that's going on, and reports on it daily. And if it was not for his reporting on it and the information getting out, no one would have any idea what's going on in there. So I thank him greatly for keeping everyone so well informed. And I do have his link below to his channel and to his Substack, his underground bunker, where he does his daily reporting. And it does appear, now that the pretrial hearings and conferences have started, that he will be reporting every day on it as long as there's something. So I recommend you all follow him. He is where a lot of this information is coming out. He needs to be commended for his tireless dedication to getting correct information out, the actual information out, in regards to this trial and many other dealings with Scientology. With that being said, let's get on with the rest of the updates. Now, according to what has happened in the last couple of days with the motions and with the judge's 39-page answer to everything that has been asked of them in regards to what should be allowed in or out, witness lists, etc. 39 pages was her answer. Now, the information coming out, of course, has been drilled down to be more digestible. But in the one instance right there where we were just talking about Leah Remini being in support of Jane Doe in bringing forth her harassment claims during the trial, it was contentious. Apparently, during the exchange, Philip Cohen wanted all of the audio and the video from all of the days in the hallways and everything, looked at and scrubbed and picked apart. And the judge said, no, no, we're not going to go that far on it. What I am going to say is that it's not going to happen anymore. We are going to be looking, really for it. They're going to be allowed to talk on it. And in my opinion, I think that may have been the best way to handle it. I'm not a lawyer or a judge, but I think if you want to shine a light on something that's being done in the dark, sometimes it does stop. Sometimes it does get a little bit better. And it appears that her allowing the testimony and her allowing them to speak on the harassment should quell some of it. They don't want to be talking about how they were harassed the day before when they go to court every day. Not in front of a jury, anyway. So, I'm hoping more will come of it. I'm hoping there'll be more of an investigation into it. This kind of stuff has to happen. We all know that one of the main reasons that the Jane Does did not file their charges immediately and nothing was done was harassment afterwards. Ever since they decided to actually tell people what was going on, they have been relentlessly harassed. And from what other uh, individuals who have left the organization or have decided to actually speak out against organizations at all, they all say the same thing: tireless harassment and ridicule and bombardment and anything they can do to mess with your lives. That's what happens. Um, that has not been something that only one person said, or this person said, or that person said. The majority that try to speak out have said the same thing. So I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here when I say that perhaps it's a good idea that they're allowed to speak about it in the court, because if it's still going on, it needs to stop. I mean, a fair trial for all, okay? And I can't see how Danny can get a fair trial if people still interfere like this. So if they're really concerned about Danny Masterson getting a fair trial, they should leave everybody alone. They should stop. The meddling is only going to make things worse. This is not 1980, 1990. It's not even year 2000. It is 2023. And it seems you can't do anything without having a light shine on it. Anything. And I think people are feeling differently about just letting people get away with things. So I'm hoping, for the sake of all of those testifying, for the sake of the witnesses on both sides, okay, for both the prosecution and the defense, I hope that the meddling stops, the harassment stops. I know I'm looking at it through rose-colored glasses, but I can hope, right? Just like the rest of you. We can just hope. You know what? Always, I feel the same way. Leah Remini has been targeted. Just to give you a little backstory, this whole thing with the Masterson trial and Leah Remini, it goes back all the way to the first allegations, and they were speaking out and all. And Leah Remini has been a champion voice to all of those who have been victimized. Okay, she's been victimized herself. She has gone head to head against them as much as she can. There has recently, just to show you that they're serious about this harassment, they have recently just done quite the hateful campaign on Leah Remini on social medias and called her every other name in regards to another trial that she knew the person, Paul Haggis. And she knew that person, and so she's been ripped over the coals for having an association with them for whatever they did wrong, for whatever the case was. She's been called everything that you could possibly think of to try to get her away from the support of these particular claimants, all three Jane Does in this trial. She's in support of them. She knows the one Jane Doe. She has been very, very supportive of her in her ordeal. And you know what? She can be. But I got to give her great great credit. And I don't know if I could, under such a barragement that she has had. She has been berated and barraged in public media, privately, everywhere that you can possibly think of. Her name, they are trying to turn into mud. She's just an outlier, right? She's just somebody that doesn't like them. They try to make it like she's got no reason to speak out about anything. Um, but her support did mean a lot, and I'm glad that she was there to help them. And whether or not it was a media thing just to show that they're not backing down, I give her credit for that too. She left respectfully when they were finished their part in the court and let the proceedings go on the way they should. She wasn't in there disrupting anything. She was there for support. She was there for testimony. She was there to ask if needed, okay? But mostly just to show support. I mean, they're not going to bring her in as a witness. Any reporting that you've seen as Leah Remini being on the witness list, I haven't seen it. And I haven't seen anybody reporting on it besides some smaller places just doing a bit of speculation here and there, and just making it like, wouldn't that be nice? I Leah Remini has not been part of Scientology for a while, although she's been a target of harassment all along. and she has been keeping abreast of everything going on because she's a great advocate for those that are getting out, um, for those that have to move on, that have to deal with it afterwards out here. So, um, but as far as I can see, she's not on the witness list. All right. However, harassment is a topic that can be talked about in the trial now. Now, of course, Philip Cohen in the last trial, he advocated greatly and strongly for Danny Masterson in defense not to have Scientology brought up all the time. He wanted a very narrow scope on how you could mention Scientology. And for some of it, Judge Almeida actually agreed that it could be very prejudicial, and she did try to keep it in certain tracks, which she again is trying to do, but she has widened the scope a little bit. And it is in favor, I think, of actually the real picture of what's going on. We all know Scientology is part of this based on the fact that the claimants and the defense are all Scientologists. Okay, Danny Masterson's a Scientologist, and all three Jane Does that have gone forward with the district attorney uh, Mueller are all Scientologists or were Scientologists at the time. Okay, or involved in Scientology some way at the time. Okay. So it is a great part because the Scientology teachings themselves are what kept them from coming forward. This is from the testimony of all three Jane Does. All three felt they could not come forward. It was against the church to do so. The church wanted to mediate privately amongst them. When they went to the church, they were told certain things that made them believe it would not be advisable for them to go forward in any way with this. Okay. It was the actual practices of the church of Scientology that kept them from coming forward. Okay. When they were out later and realized what had happened to them and that they haven't recovered from it, that became an issue. Scientology does have a part in this trial, no matter how much the defense wants to try to keep it out. And I'd like to remind you all, forgive me just a little bit snarky, but for as often as Philip Cohen wanted to keep Scientology out of this trial, I think if you go back and play back all of the testimony and everything that's done, it was Philip Cohen that said the word Scientology more than anyone. Day after day, he brought in motions about this and that with Scientology. Day after day, he brought it up over and over again. Thankfully, it wasn't in front of the jury every time. That would have been really not to his best practice that he was trying to get across. However, I can tell you that I heard the word Scientology out of his mouth more than anyone's. It was almost laughable. Because on the one hand, every day a motion about who said Scientology and why it should be stricken, and he's the one talking about it constantly. It was a bit ridiculous. Anyway, I digress. Mhm. Yep. And they anyway, that's kind of good. I mean, not kind of good news. That is good news that they're going to be able to speak on Scientology in regards to the harassment. They're also going to be able to speak on Scientology in regards to the practicing and teachings of Scientology that may have kept the women from coming forward with their charges. And Judge Almeida has put that in there based on how the defense decided to rip apart that the three women were only coming together to coerce each other into these charges against Danny Weissman, that they are supporting and they are collaborating together to make this whole scenario larger than it was, and blah blah blah. And they, you know, there's no credence to how they felt about that whole thing back then. It does look that way. They are attacking the individual testimony. They are trying to look as if they it was coercive to all of them. The testimony that it was collaborated, that it was planned, that this is organized in somehow, because they have a civil suit, which also will be allowed to be mentioned in a fine line during the trial, which is also different from before. They are going to be mentioned it because Philip Cohen brought it up in the other trial. So they do get to defend against it in this one. Those allegations that the only reason they are bringing charges so they have better claim in their civil suit, so that they can bring another charge forward in a civil suit organized against Danny Masterson, that it's all about the money. that it's all about winning the civil suit. Okay. So that can get defended against by the prosecution, and the witnesses can actually speak on it in limited way, regarding how and why they filed, and it's going to be about the practices of Scientology and being prevented from bringing forth the charges against Danny as they should, for the harassment, for the targeted harassment and the threats. That all comes in. And with being able to speak about Scientology a little bit more, especially into the practices of Scientology, and also more importantly, in regards to how the victims felt at the time, okay, how each Jane Doe felt at the time, how the teachings of Scientology were affecting them to prevent them from understanding the situation that they were in. Judge Almeida is allowing the testimony of Claire Headley in this trial. Now, that's a big change from last time. The defense had motioned against adding Claire Headley to the witness list for the prosecution last trial because they didn't want her anywhere near it. She can speak from being in there, from doing the teachings, and from educating the women of the Scientology. From being on the inside, she is allowed to speak on it, on the teachings of Scientology that made the women feel that rape didn't exist in a relationship, that they could not actually say that Danny did anything like that. This is big. And I don't know. I don't know how some of you guys feel. Well, that was huge. I'm very pleased they're allowing the full testimony of Claire Headley in there, because she also has great information on the practices of Scientology that had the women feeling the way they did, that kept the charges from coming forward, kept the women from being able to file a claim with the police department as they wanted, who actually kept them thinking of it in a different way all along. They were wronged also by those practices, not only by the actions of Danny Masterson, or the alleged actions of Danny Masterson, I should say. Remember, this is a trial. He's not guilty until they say he's guilty. The Jane Does are going to give testimony on everything that he did to them. And now they're allowed to say why they didn't perhaps act the way you or I or the people hearing it on the jury would have reacted to those situations. They are allowed to give the counterpart to what makes it look so odd as to why all these years later they are saying something about it. They're allowed to balance it out with the rest of the information, and that's a good thing. That's a very good thing to have all of the information there. Now, of course, the defense is able to go back, and they're going to be able to cross-examine Claire Headley, and they're going to be able to try to make it look biased, and they're going to be able to try to pick apart everything. And that is their right. That's the part. But the thing that is so, what I feel is so beneficial, is now the full picture of how we got here gets to be portrayed in this next trial coming forward. Okay. Um, there was so much. There was actually so much. Um, the fourth victim, I'll just use the word victim, the fourth alleged victim of Danny Masterson, Visi, who actually testified in the last trial, will be allowed to testify in this one. Okay. But they are also allowing, let me just get I don't want to mess up the names. And then also, I don't want to be the only thing you're staring at either for a while. So let me just bring up, okay, in something else to look at because it just can't be my avatar. Okay, we talked about, this is Leah Remini. For those of you that may not be familiar, I can't imagine not anyone knows who Leah Remini is when I say that name, but just in case, she's been prominent in going against Scientology since she got out. She was a member, a lifelong member. She was in there as a child, okay? And she was there for a long time in Hollywood, part of the whole thing, okay? And then she got out, and you may be aware of some of the documentaries she did. She had a whole series with Mike Rinder and they did talking to people in and out of Scientology and all of the goings on, and just trying to educate everyone on the information of what is going on inside that cult. And yes, I said cult. Okay. All right. This is Judge Almeida and Danny Masterson. That's a more recent, that's from trial days. That's one of the trial pictures of Danny. It's a more accurate picture of who we're talking about for right now. And with your permissions and without any complaint, I will leave that up there for us to look at while I'm talking instead for a little bit. Because these rulings of Judge Almeida's are quite something. All right. They really are. The rundown that was given by Tony Ortega is detailed. He knows everybody loves the details. So, on his underground bunker, he put out yesterday a more detailed list of what Judge Almeida said in that 39-page document that we don't have, but must be stunning. It did have a lot of law in it, which I would have loved to seen. But Philip Cohen had put a lot forward that he wanted out. Okay. And not everything is out. But in regards to, I want to get the name of the other witness. Oh, this is good. There's just so much. Okay. The other witness, let me just say. Kathleen Jenkins is her name. Remember, Miss Vesi's first name was Trisha. She was the actress who said that she was accosted during a after party. She felt drugged. She was sleepy. I think you may be able to go back to the testimony. I've got a playlist of all of the reporting from the testimony that we had learned about all during the last trial, all the way through the mistrial, including the questions and answers afterward, including conversations with Chris Shelton afterwards in regards to some of the things that happened. There's even another conversation with someone else there. That was an ex-Scientologist too, about where they thought things were going. It was a little upsetting, the mistrial, but we can understand. There was a lot going on afterwards about that juror, about the head juror and all of that, and that seems to have squelched down. And we're just hoping we can get a jury that can look at it, can look at all the evidence. One of the most startling things that I heard from everyone after, including the jurors, is that they didn't look at all the evidence anymore. They discounted a lot of it. They just didn't ask to see it anymore. They didn't want to hear the testimony. They really doubted the women's statements. Based on a lot going back and forth. They really did. So in this time, the prosecution gets to shore that up a little bit. They are also bringing in a woman from, her name is Kathleen Jenkins, who claims to be assaulted at a cast party in Canada in 2000. And like Vesey, she's going to testify as a past bad acts witness because the judge is allowing them to show because of the coercion claim by Philip Cohen, because of the collaboration claim the defense put forward in the last trial, because of how they tried to put it forward that the three claimants are all in cahoots together and it's just them making it up. The prior bad acts are allowed in to show that it's more than just them. And that to me seemed fair and unusual, but fair. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm thinking that is one of the fairest things that she did. It should always be heard in full. Right, Crazy Cat? All of it. Okay. All right. So Kathleen Jenkins is going to be allowed. Philip Cohen objected strongly, but it's staying in. He tried to say that her claims are more about being drugged than about an assault through force of fear, which, if you'll remember, force or fear to actually come to go along with this is one of the claims here. and why the three of them are claiming it together through this. This is how the district attorney is bringing it forward. This is why, if he's found guilty, Danny Masterson will face 45 years to life. Okay, 45 years. Um, because if he is actually, if the jury finds him guilty of all three acts against these women and being done, this assault being done with force or fear, like that way, yeah, that's a lot stronger sentence. Okay, but they make up the charged counts on the case, three of them. Okay, and in answer to that, also, um, Kathleen Jenkins' ex-husband is also on the witness list, presumed to give corroborating testimony to back up the description of what Kathleen Jenkins went through. Um, mm, Jane Doe's mother is also on the list. Jane Doe 3's husband's on the list. Rachel D is still on the list. That's Jane Doe's cousin from the first trial. Okay. Jordan Ladd, actress friend of Jane Doe 2, she testified, remember, that of what Jane Doe 2, during her testimony, she collaborated what was told to her in 2003, um, and that she had said, please don't tell anybody. Okay. Somebody who was excluded was Nicholas Olszewski. Again, he's being excluded from the list, although they had tried to get him in on the first trial and they tried again on this trial, because Nicholas Olszewski is the one who had testimony that said that while he worked with Danny Masterson on the Ranch series, eh, that no, that he knew him from working on the Ranch series, but that he had witnessed some interesting behavior by Masterson. And one of them was a conversation, uh, a, a conversation that he had with several people in a dressing room, giving advice to other ranch members, females. Okay, and that before they should go around and go out during Las Vegas for any kind of like parties and things like that. Danny Masterson spoke to them and kind of tried to give them a crash course in how to avoid getting roofied, which Nicholas Olszewski thought was rather odd that he had such detailed information on how to prevent it. Now, that in itself is quite prejudicial when you think of the fact that what all the women claim to feel like they were drugged, all accepting drinks from Danny Masterson before the incidences, every single one, okay, has testified to that, about feeling out of control, not able to move their body, feeling like they weren't in their body at the time, being unconscious and then waking up in a different place, feeling like they could be like just picked up and moved places and changed, feeling like they weren't in control. These are all things that could be attributed to being drugged, but they're not coming out and saying and accusing of being drugged. They're just saying, this is what I felt like. Because it is so many years after the fact, there is nothing, once you say, like, I think he drugged me, there's nothing for the defense to say, like, well, where's the reports? Like, where's the toxicology? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? They're allowed to say how they felt, but they can't really accuse him of that. And that is why this Nicholas Olszewski, his testimony is not coming in, because it's, for one, it's prejudicial. Two, it's not going to add anything to the story. It does make Danny look bad, but then again, it could also, to me, I'm not thinking it makes him look that bad. I mean, I have brothers, I have friends who are men who also talk to women about protecting themselves when they're out. And I know for that they are not people out there roofing people. Okay. They are just protecting young women and saying, hey, don't be foolish. Always go in pairs, cover your drink, do the smart thing. Just making sure you're protecting yourself, because they know there's bad people out there, because we hear about it every day. So, of course, I don't have the whole picture of what he would have testified to, maybe his actions, his physical, uh you know his body language while he was doing it, maybe the things he was saying, something made Nicholas Olszewski think that it was odd, and he remembers it all this time. So, you know but it's not coming in. Okay, it's the comments made by Masterson. This was way back in 2015. the argument from Philip Cohen was that they're not relevant to incidents that were alleged from back in 2001 and 2003. And on that point, wouldn't you agree he's accurate? How could something he said in 2015 about, commonplace roofing going on seriously be tied to that incidences from years ago? Yes, you can make an inference because the women do testify to feeling like they were drugged. But in all reality, that's a bit of a stretch, wouldn't you agree? And I think that that was a good ruling there because it's just going to open it up for so much more. Okay. Rachel S. is also on the witness list again. That's the friend of Jane Doe too. She is also a former Scientologist. So she testified to being told by Jane Doe 2 what occurred and about the incident with Masterson. Okay. Mariah O'Brien is on the list, the prosecution's witness list. She was formerly married to Giovanni Ribisi, and she's the mother to their daughter Lucia Ribisi. And she testified that Jane Doe 2 blurted out that she had been attacked by Masterson when she was at a dinner party at O'Brien's house. She had previously testified that she was worked closely with Danny and Bijou Masterson as a designer in exchange you know, smiles with him at court and stuff. There's still going to be the Los Angeles Police Department witnesses. That will be Detective Humberto Jamie. He did not actually testify in the first one. Esther Mayapi, okay, that's Dr. I believe that's Reyes's new name. Detective Deborah Myers, Detective Alexander Schlegel, and Detective Javier Vargas. Those are all names that you may be familiar with from the first trial. The experts, as I said, they are allowing Claire Headley in. Okay. But the prosecution, interestingly enough, has swapped out Dr. Mindy Mechanic for Dr. Barbara Ziv. Okay, MD. This Barbara Ziv will testify to the possibility of Masterson's assault victims were drugged based on arguments that they heard that Tony Ortega specifically, I saw then in one of his articles that the arguments during the other day's hearings were the biggest change from the prosecution's approach on the trial, because greater emphasis is going to be on the statements of the women on how they felt being feeling drugged or feeling not themselves after uh, contact with Masterson in regards to a drink and things like that. Uh, of course, the defense is trying to keep all of that out. Um, it puts emphasis that is not related to the charges of the case, he said, and it doesn't actually apply to being forcible or force or fear. Um, Actually, Judge Almeida is letting parts of that in based on what she said in her rulings on the 39-page ruling. Okay. People who are not on the list that were last time, Sean Fabos, who kind of in his testimony kind of changed it the day before after some weird meeting in a hallway with the private investigator from the Masterson side. All of a sudden remembered some testimony he had not said anything about in years, although interviewed several times back and forth. All of a sudden, he got a recall based on a statement somebody said. Well, he's not here. Mhm. He unexclaimed he was on that Florida vacation, and this has been disputed by people involved with Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe's testimony that he was actually in Florida on that case and witnessed things. No, he wasn't. He had been on many Florida trips, but not that one. Um, so he's completely out. Damian Perkins is not on the list. Eric Geisler is not on the list. And Marty Singer, Danny Masterson's entertainment lawyer, is not on the list anymore. Okay. These people were on the list last time, but were never called. Okay. Um, most of the list has been approved from who we settled on it. There is an LAPD criminalist specializing in drug analysis, and the prosecution actually wants to call this person as a second expert witness, just with the focus on the feelings of and how it can happen, but not is if it did. All of the witnesses that they're pulling forward in regards to perhaps drugging are not to say that the women were drugged. They're there to support the women's testimonies of what it feels like to be drugged, and to say that that does follow certain patterns of how you would feel and reactions, especially those in the police department and in psychology that deal with people that have gone through this, and that's the expert testimony they'll be giving, not the fact that whether or not they've been drugged, but just to collaborate some of the statements that they're making in regards to how they felt, to show that that's not unusual. Also, Dr. Barbara Ziv is also going to listed to give testimony in regards to how being drugged during an event like this can actually affect memory and how you look at things and that's very important, because of one of the main issues the defense attacked all three women on is you said this and then you said that, in regards to small changes in reporting of certain things, to the multiple interviews that they had, the multiple reviews, reports that were taken in over the years. Remember, it took years for this to come to fruition. There are multiple reports and statements out there that need to be collaborated and brought forth. And that is another ruling that the judge had. The defense is allowed to say that there's inconsistencies. And former Detective Reyes was her last name at the time. I think it's Maipe now, Maipe now. I may be pronouncing that wrong, and I do apologize. Well, they will be allowed to testify that they said this during this interview and then that during that interview. That's still allowed to be there. However, the prosecution in this case is allowed to bring the full interviews in to counter that it's not the whole testimony. It is just like this part or that part, and that the bulk of the testimony remains the same from interview to interview. And that's a very important point here. That's a change from the last trial also. Okay. And I thought like a more positive one for portraying the whole picture of everything. Um mm. Uh, the council has they've asked for additional time during attorney voir dire during the jury selection and stuff like that, um, to question prospective jurors as discussed in court with the parties. They both feel they need to actually vet them a little more strongly based on things that happened in the last one, and also based on the fact that it's a retrial and etc. And the court did entertain will entertain requests for individual extensions of time to talk to jurors. Okay. um and like I the other thing that was brought forward was like I said, the admission of evidence regarding Scientology. What I'd like to do now is to tell you how Scientology is going to be coming in. Okay. um First of all, the court just shot them down and said you can't just eliminate Scientology based on Danny Masterson's First Amendment right to not have his doctrine brought in. No, because it's bigger than that. The admission of Scientology evidence, it provides an important context for the victim's delayed reporting of the crimes, which itself bears on the evaluation of the witness's credibility and the actual occurrence of the crimes. So, in other words, you can't eliminate it when it is the reason we're here at this late date, and the reason for the actions of some things that the witnesses actually went through, and the things that the witnesses did not. It's to portray the whole picture. It has to be there. That's what she's saying. Okay. um the Scientology evidence is going to include definitions and explanations of some Scientology terms, and positions within the organization will be admissible only for these following purposes. And this is what she laid out. And this is coming again from Tony Ortega's reporting. He laid it out quite nicely. And so I'm just going to go forward. Please give him good credit and subscribe if you haven't already. And this comes from uh, his underground bunker reporting of the other day. They're going to be allowed to explain the victim's delay in reporting the charged crimes, including reports made to individuals within Scientology and their response to those claims, including any correspondence in documents. They're going to be able to talk about Scientology to explain the victim's belief that Scientology prohibits them from reporting crimes committed by other Scientologists in good standing to outside non Scientologist law enforcement. That includes the belief that Scientologists hold disdain for outside law enforcement and the secular court system. They're going to be able to mention Scientology to explain the victim's fear of retaliation, fear of being declared a suppressive person, and fear of harassment experienced after reporting the charged crimes to outside law enforcement. They can speak on Scientology to explain the victim's actions before, during, and after the charged incidents and relevant to the charged incidents. So anything that Scientology had to do with the assault before, during, and after, how they felt about it, the teachings, why they felt it wasn't like they were confused. Have I been violated? Have I not? Do I have to accept this? All of that is it. Okay. To explain the witness protection, prosecution and defense can use Scientology to explain witnesses' ties to the Scientology organization, both past and present, in order to understand the nature and context of the relationships between all of the individuals testifying before the jury. Like, why am I hearing from you? Like, for example, Claire Headley coming forward. Why are we hearing from Claire Headley? Or why are we hearing from certain people in regards to the organization? Mhm. Anyway, they can also use it to explain the discrepancy between Jane Doe 1's first statement as written under the direction of the supervision of the Scientology officials and Jane Doe's 1 later statements made free from any direct and immediate Scientology influence. Now that's important because remember when she first came forward, that statement is very much different than the first statement. And during the first trial, they used the differences between statement 1 and statement 2 against her for credibility. However, they weren't allowed to speak as freely on it that they were actual Scientologists there directing that interview in the first one. And they weren't allowed to speak on that because remember, there was very limited parameter. And although we're not allowed to talk about it freely, we have to talk about it within some guidelines. It does believe that those guidelines have been expanded a little bit to portray the real picture of what happened, which that part I'm pleased about because you can't have witnesses trying to speak on this and not talk about Scientology. They're all Scientologists. They're all related to Scientologists. It's related to the teachings, the way the women felt, the way that they were educated within the church itself to believe this act didn't exist, couldn't exist within the realm of what they were taught. That's a big deal. That affects consent to me. Okay, this is my lay perspective on it. That affects the whole damn thing. These women look at it afterwards and see that they were meant to believe something that just wasn't true. Okay, they were told it didn't exist. They were told they could not have been violated against their will because that doesn't exist. This is the whole point. And now the point gets to be talked about freely. Is Scientology. We are going to now hear from people who actually educate the women on the fact that rape doesn't exist in Scientology and that when you're in a relationship with a Scientology, that can't happen no matter what. It just doesn't exist. And even if you feel like it exists, you can't say it. You don't say that word, you don't use that word, and you don't press charges on anyone above you. That's a big deal. It's a very, very big deal. Okay. Expert testimony regarding Scientology relevant to the above listed categories and as further set forth later in this order. And that is Claire Headley. Okay. Prior acts witnesses. The fact that we have two bad prior acts witnesses coming forward and being allowed to testify. And that was basically a misstep on the defense part for going so hard on the credibility of the three witnesses and actually accusing them of collaborating with each other to bring these stories forward. It does allow the prosecution to bring witnesses forward to say, nope, well, I'm sorry, he did it to me too, and I didn't even know them. Like, I wasn't aware of that at the time. This happened then, this happened over there. This is totally separate from it, and it still happened. So no, may not be that way. To allow them to present the full picture to the jury is the one thing that I am pleased about almost all of this. Okay, the testimony from the prior trial about feeling drugs. Okay, all of that testimony is still allowed to come in. It's not going to be eliminated. Um, being actually um intoxicated did put them in situations, did account for some of the memory losses, did account for the vulnerability and this and the unsureness and everything, along with Scientology, and all that's allowed to come in. However, Philip Cohen lost the fight in being able to say that Jane Doe must have been drunk because she peed in public. Do you remember that from the first trial? I was livid. So was Judge Albedo, because she said, like, I'm sorry, people pee in public. That doesn't mean you're drunk. Okay. If she had to go, she jumped out of the car and she went. It's like, I don't know. Judge Almeida thought that that was prejudicial. Judge Almeida thought that that presented the wrong light, and he was pushing that forward to mean she must have been drunk before she got anywhere near Danny Masterson. So obviously, he could not have got her drunk or drugged, because she would like that before she got there, because she peed in public. Okay, not anything she said, not anybody else's testimony of how she was acting prior, that she was drunk, or not her own testimony or anything that she was drinking, because several of them do admit to having a glass of wine before they meet him, or they are very honest about what they consumed, what their habits were, whether they were in a party situation or not. They're all quite honest about everything that was going on. So Judge Almeida did think that that was overly prejudicial, and he doesn't get to bring that up. So there we go. The court is going to allow, as I said, all of the testimony on Dr. Barbara Zeev on the subjects of intimate partner sexual assault and violence, and the effects of alcohol and drugs on brain and memory. Now, when we talk about intimate partner sexual assault and violence, they're talking about legally, okay? And I'm not a lawyer, but this part of consent I have researched, like, back and forth on it, and it's a bit contentious, back and forth. But there's always been the concern of consent, whether consented, if you are in a relationship already. Let's just talk about unconscious consent. Let's talk about consent when you're sleeping. Several of the charges here allude to a situation to where one of the Jane Does, not on the charged event she speaks of, but the other supporting event, which, by the way, is allowed in full context now, regardless of Philip Cohen's trying to keep it out because it wasn't charged. But that is the event where Jane Doe 3 reports that she was violated while she was sleeping, and that it was confirmed to her by Danny afterwards that that's what happened. She had physical feelings of it. She didn't know what happened. She had gone to bed feeling, she may have been drugged, she may not have, but either way, there is testimony going to come forward that this happened in the bed, that they shared together, but while she was unconscious. Okay. And that's a big thing about being able to talk about intimate partner assault. Um, there are studies out there that I have been looking at that say that most intimate partner assault does occur while the woman is sleeping, or it starts while the woman is sleeping, and that you may wake up into sleep. You can even say no, but it's already in the middle. You may feel pressured. There's like tons of stuff out there on it, on whether or not consent laws have to include something like this. You know, it's a shame that we have to talk about it like that. It's a shame I even have to have that kind of conversation. Um, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And when I try to talk about it, I know that people think I get emotional and I get a little, eh, a little uptight about it. And I feel like I might have to stand on a soapbox a little bit, because I do not understand how come people don't understand that consent is fluid, and that it doesn't go for every situation. A yes isn't a yes forever. A yes isn't a yes for everything. Okay. A yes is for whatever you're talking about at the time. Okay. And situations change. And most of the men I speak to understand this 100%. And that's why when we come up against these kind of things where they don't, I'm wondering, like, how do you get there? How do you get there where you get to disregard another person's choice, another person's opinion, respect? How do you get there to do that? Oh, I don't understand it. Um, it's frustrating for me. And also the fact that our laws don't allow for it, that our laws are falling down on the job in some cases on it. Judge Almeida has a good understanding and really has put it forward to the jury when she explained consent quite eloquently about it being fluid and about yes is yes and no is no, and these things need to happen even if you are in a relationship. I mean, she was pretty clear that people have rights. All people, including women, you know, regardless of how you feel about us, regardless of what kind of relationship you have with us. Yeah, we do. um, and she was very clear about it. And I'm going to again, and I apologize. I said I was going to put the Fry's statement out on my community tab, and a whole bunch of stuff happened, and I did not put that post out. So it's going to be included in the description of this video, and there'll be another post about it on the community tab as we go forward with more on this trial. One of the ability for Dr. Zib to be able to talk about this is a big thing in this trial in particular. It wasn't talked about in the first one at all. Um, she's also adding the testimony of Claire Headley on the subjects of Scientology teachings that a person in an intimate relationship cannot be raped, that Scientologists cannot use that word, and that Scientologists are prohibited or discouraged from reporting other Scientologists in good standing to outside law enforcement, or they will face repercussions for doing so, and that the purpose and meaning of conversations with and statements and correspondence between the victims and Scientology officers regarding the charged events. She's allowed to talk about all of it, about what actually happened, the reports that were taken, the things that weren't done, the things that were said to those. She gets to collaborate what the Jane Does have said was said to them. Mm. She says that, of course, the questions of qualifications and bias go to weight. And of course, the defense can challenge anything, but it's allowed to come in because it exists. The court is going to grant the testimony of the LAPD analyst regarding toxicology and also the existence and use of date rape jokes in the people's case. But however, it's only going to be in regards to how these things are ingested, how they become available, what is common practice and use of them, the side effects. Okay, and it's gonna it's it because she believes that the jury needs to understand about that process because it's beyond the scope of normal understanding, and that it's beyond common knowledge, so to speak. And so she's allowing that testimony. However, they're not allowed to say whether or not he had done anything or actually infer anything about whether or not that has actually occurred, just that the feelings that they had kind of coincide with what their actual knowledge of how these things happen. They're not allowed to say whether or render an opinion on whether or not that happened in conjunction with any of the charges, but they're allowed to collaborate how they felt and say that it it goes along with the common knowledge of how they believe these things happen. Does that make sense? Um, they may render an opinion regarding a hypothetical that contains facts established by evidence, but that's it. In other words, from their experience, from where they're coming from, they can make a hypothetical about what the women are saying, but they cannot even hint that he did or he didn't. Does it? I know that sounds very confusing, but I think you get what I'm saying there. Okay. We did talk about the uncharged offenses that are being allowed in. That would be the testimony about Tricia Vesey and Kathleen Jenkins. And also, no no more going back and forth like they did in the first trial in regards to the second incident with Jane Doe 3 that she testified about, the one we were just talking about with her being asleep. That incident is in. They're allowed to talk about it, although Philip Cohen did fight tooth and nail to keep it out because it wasn't a charged offense. But because It does relate to the whole situation around. It does have pertinent information into regards to the relationship of Jane Doe 3 and Danny Masterson, and it is going to stay in. Okay. They are also going to allow the defense to um, bring in any evidence regarding any other conduct of complaining witnesses to attack credibility. They are not going to allow that. Okay. They are not allowing Philip Cohen to bring in the prior sexual experiences of any of the victims. No talk about the brother, no talk about anything. Okay. Whether true or untrue. They're not allowed to. She is excluding it. All of the victims, charged and uncharged, prior sexual history and prior sexual partners is excluded. She's protecting them. They're not going to do it. Now that is based on law in that state. Okay. And Philip Cohen should know that. Okay, that's based on the evidence code section 782. Nope. Anything you want to bring forward as evidence that would say something completely damning, you got to bring it to the court for us. So we're going to go through all of it. You're not allowed to bring it up during session. The harassment and the threats to the complainants and the witnesses is in. The court is going to admit all the testimony regarding witnesses' fear of retaliation, fear of being declared as oppressive, and separated from family and friends, excommunicated, belief that they had been harassed by Scientology for cooperating with police, all of it. All of it's in regards to witnesses and the claimants. Okay. The court excludes any question of Jane Doe's first impression that Danny may have accidentally penetrated her. Philip Cohen made a big deal about that in the first one. And they're saying it falls outside evidence code section 800 as permissible because listen, no one can testify to the state of mind of Danny Masterson on whether he did it accidentally or on purpose. So it's out. She can testify to any of the defendant's actions and objective behavior, but she can't say anything about whether something attempted was accidental or on purpose because she doesn't know the other person's mind. So all of that is out. Okay. Like I said, Detective Reyes is allowed to testify about the differences in the reports. And that the defense had been alleging that the victims have colluded together and fabricated all of these versions, so he's using parts of these reports to show so. But also she says that the people can come in with the full statements and everything instead of it being cherry picked. They're allowed to bring all of it in to show prior consistent statements to counteract that. She says it's fair. If you're going to cherry pick, she said this, then she said that, then the state is allowed to bring in all of the report to show, yes, but look at the bulk of consistency here. So, okay, 5% she did not tell it the same. 95% she did, or something. I'm just making those numbers up. But do you see what I mean? It's allowed to be counterbalanced, which sounds only fair. I know, Anna. How do you accidentally do something I don't know. I'm not sure what is meant by that in totality, to tell you the truth. Okay. Um, Another big thing is we're allowed to talk about the civil suit and the settlement agreement, where one of them was paid to not talk about it anymore. The court will admit evidence regarding the facts that the victims have filed a civil suit in 2017. Actually, it came forward in 2019. I think they started talking about it or doing paperwork back then, which it's still pending, waiting the outcome. Okay. Because you can't really go forward with the civil suit while there's a criminal case going on in regards to the same people. Um, this suit does claim harassment and stalking against the defendants, and that Scientology, it's filed against Scientology and David Miscavige, and it is seeking damages. It does excludes any further inquiry into it, just a mention of it. Okay, they're allowed to say that it happened. Evidence regarding the facts that it's filed, okay? But that's it. Not the status of it, not any evidence in it, anything like that. Okay. Um there was a lot in here about civil statutory law, but it's all being excluded. Philip Cohen did do a go around here. He tried to allege that the victims are further motivated to fabricate the charges so that they can file another civil lawsuit or enhance their own civil lawsuit. She's not having it. She's not going to let testimony of that come forward. It finds that this is preferred evidence. It's speculative, irrelevant, and or collateral at best, and it would be confusing and misleading for the jury, and it's not to be entered. That's it. She's excluding it. She's like, no. About the gun. Oh, Jane Doe had testified that Danny owned a gun. They're going to be able to talk about the fact that he owned a gun. She's going to admit that evidence. However, she's excluding any reference to any other firearms unless permission is first sought by the court. So, if you're going to talk about any other guns he owns or anything else, please talk to me. She wants to hear about every single issue of it. She's allowing this one because of the independent record search that was establishing that defendant did actually own that firearm, and it was registered to him during the relevant time period. But that's the only one they're allowed to speak about. Okay. They're not going to be talking about Girls Gone Wild. They're not going to be talking about the gun having special meaning in the evidence as far as the reporting. Detective Shagel can testify the word gun was uniquely important to him based upon his training, but he cannot and does not speak for all law enforcement generally, and that needs to be said. Okay. Um the omission of speaking about the gun in the secondary report is not it. The court has reserved the right to actually speak on that. She wants to hear the testimony. She also wants to hear the testimony about the Scientology lawyers' actions regarding trial witnesses. She also wants to wait and hear the testimony in regards to the term of the use DJ Donkey Punch, which was Danny Masterson's name at the time for when he did his GJ parties, on whether that would be relevant. She totally, absolutely excluded any mention of Lily, who passed away, and any circumstances surrounding her death, an alleged incident involving the defendant. She considered it irrelevant. Okay. They're going to she's waiting to speak on some of the prior incidences with Jane Doe too. She wants to hear more about how the testimony will go forward on those. However, she does admit the testimony regarding Jane Doe two's previous attempts to report the assault. She feels those are relevant. And that she feels that Scientology organization may have prevented it, and that she is allowed to speak on how that impacted her conduct and was related to how things came forward. And that seems fair. Okay. As I said before, Nicholas Ozleski is out in regards to his statements of Danny talking about how to protect yourself against roofies, or it's some other date of time that does not relevant to the actual time period of the claims. Okay. Okay. This is in here. The court is excluding any mention of reference for the status of the case or investigation of the DA as a DA reject. Remember, these charges were tried to be brought forward previously, earlier on, all the way back in 2017 and even prior. Okay. Philip Cohen had repeatedly put out the term DA reject. In other words, using that terminology to try to influence, like, no, it was not credible. It was not calm. He used such a language. She found that to be prejudicial, and they're not going to be allowed to say that. The defense can also bring forward that after later contact detectives in the district's attorney charges were filed shortly after, the state can talk about how they built the case and things like that. However, just that kind of slander, DA reject or declination or any other regarding actions taken out of the district attorney's office in 2004 regarding the 2003 incident. And she says that she's got penal code to back that up, and she's just going to go in it. What is relevant is whether the jury believes the charges have been proven at trial, not the opinion of a district attorney's filing deputy on an earlier date. Well said, Doctor Judge Almeida, rather. Well said. It does not matter what a clerk or anybody else said in regards to why charges were going forward or not, or who stamped what and everything. It matters more that we're here now, and it matters more what the jury is going to say about the evidence that she does get to hear. Going back to then and to why those things, they can say that they were filed. They can say that they did not go forward with them, but they're not allowed to actually use that terminology, DA reject or declination, or, that they decided not to go for, that negative rhetoric that he was putting forward, to use it to discredit the witnesses' stories, where they had no control over whether charges were filed or not at the time. She talked, remember that in the closing statements, Philip Cohen did use a reasonable doubt chart, and that went back and forth. What struck me about that reasonable doubt chart is, of all the things that the jury asked to see, none of the evidence, none of the testimony, none of that. They wanted to see that damn reasonable chart again. That's what they wanted to look at. First thing. So his words mattered. So did his display. He made a big impact on that. So George Almeida is allowing it to come in. However, she's made a few changes. She said that there were words on that reasonable doubt chart that need to come off because they were not in the actual definition. It needed to be modified. Okay. Because nowhere in the reasonable doubt jury instruction does the word definitely appear. And so because definitely was prominently displayed on that chart, she wants it removed. While the defense is allowed to use that chart, it has to accurately portray state law and the charge from the judge to the jury, although otherwise it's out. Okay, so it has to be removed. It has to be done. And in addition, the defense and the people must submit any demonstrative charts that they will use to the court for prior approval before they use it in any argument or at any stage of the trial, period. All of this was from Charlene Almeida, judge of the Superior Court, who is doing this for the Masterson trial again. All right. All right. That was a lot of talking. Let me just show you. Oh, you see, we could do a new picture for the rest of this. Reinhold Mueller is again the district attorney for this. That's another picture of Danny during the trial. His appearance is different than we all remember him from The Ranch or that 70s shows. So no, this is how he appeared every day. Remember, this is many years later. Okay, and I think I have one more too of Philip Cohen. These are all the players, yeah? That's Philip Cohen. In one things that Tony Ortega amused me about in his reporting every day in the last trial was that he called out Philip Cohen for his dapperness. He always talked about how he was dressed and how he looked. And he's but dresses very well. I mean, as you can see here, he's not afraid of color. He's a well-dressed man. He wears a suit quite properly, looking good. And he would often talk about the color of the suit and the color of the tie and his ascot, and his pocket kerchief, everything. It always looked well. It was one of the things that kind of made it a little more light, the situation. And although the situation, because it is an assault, these horrific claims the women are making against Danny Masterson, and I say alleged only because this is a trial and we need to actually hear everything. He is not guilty until the jury says so. And the jury couldn't come to any conclusion in it was a mistrial, that they just couldn't agree. And they came forward later with some accusations about the jury. There was some questions on whether the jury foreman, the one that was doing all the talking afterwards and doing the interviews, actually had not answered questions properly in the jury questionnaire, even to be seated, had kept some information about being he was actually in law enforcement for a while and didn't answer that question in great detail and give him the information. He also has a son who was up on charges of assault, and he didn't report that either. Now he says it's because, oh, that was so long ago, I don't even recall. It really was only not that long ago. Well, there was some speculation back and forth about all of that on, him just wanting to be on the jury. It's questionable. I don't want to make a big deal about it. It was a big ruckus all over YouTube, all over social media, everywhere. Um, there were interviews done. People got the information out, and the truth came out that it's, we're having another trial anyway. So that information coming out didn't cause the new trial, but it kind of gives us some light as to why we are going through another retrial, why the mistrial may or may not have happened. It was quite concerning to hear them speak about the fact they didn't want to see any further evidence. They didn't want to re-go over any of the testimony or the challenges that were there. They kind of glid over a lot of things, and just focuses on mostly in that particular trial. It was the opening statements and the closing statements of the prosecution and the defense attorney that mattered the most. They really listened to what Philip Cohen said in closing, because that is exactly how they, when they came out of that room, what they were talking about and how they portrayed, how they were looking at things. That just shows you the arguments, like that's not the evidence, and that's why they couldn't see the reasonable doubt chart. That's not evidence. Anything that the attorney says in closing argument is the argument, and he's painting the picture for you, but it's not evidence. In order to make your decision, you're supposed to look at the evidence. And so it's my hope that the second jury, once seated, will actually pay more attention to the actual testimony and the evidence, and not the provocations of the attorneys as well. Although they did a damn good job. And I think I said that during the whole trial last time, that as much as I get aggravated with some of the shenanigans that were going on during that trial, it is quite evident that Philip Cohen was doing the best that he could for his client, and he was going to keep doing it. And I expect we're going to see a lot more in this one too. But I have to give DA Mueller a lot of credit and his team, because they really held their ground too. And it does look as if they are looking at what happened during the past trial to get the full picture out in a better way this time. And I'm giving both sides credit for that. Okay, it gives Philip Cohen more to go push back on, but it also gives the DA room to actually paint the picture more fully, what it was and how much Scientology did have a play in where what the women were thinking. What came forward from what I've read in all the statements from the DA's office and from Philip Cohen's office himself, even jurors that spoke out, not being able to understand why it took so long for them to press the charges, or it being so long that all this is coming forward, not kind of understanding the context of how Scientology could have kept the women from coming forward, or understanding even what actually had happened to them at the time. Um, being Having that testimony come forward now is a plus, because it is, when I'm looking at it, more the clear picture of the whole situation. And so on that aspect, I feel we'll have a more fair trial, actually. I think that both sides will be able to present evidence for or against those issues adequately. Um, yeah. I'm wondering how old of you. I'm going to check in now. I've been speaking a lot. Mm. Hi, Mipit. April, it's good to see you. Icarus, always Verilion. Thank you. Driving and listening, please drive safe. And hopefully, see on my soapbox, hopefully I didn't get you too upset. Hey, Beck. Okay. It's good to see you guys. Hey, Christopher Mate. Neil. Hi. Those are two names I don't often see in a true crime, but welcome. This is a contentious case with a lot of issues that I think both of you will be speaking on too. Sleet, it's nice to see you. All right, so questions. Hey, Charlie, nice to see you. Late in the day here. Ox, it's always good to see you here too. Yeah, I'm glad to see so many names that follow this, my true crime for other things. This is not a pleasant case. It's not a pleasant case for me. It's not a pleasant case for anyone, actually. It's a frustrating one. So to see some of you all here, it makes me feel a little bit better about talking about it for so long. Crazy Cat, nice to see you. Jin, hey, good. It's I'm hoping everybody's having a good day. The one good thing is it's not Monday. I might be out here talking true crime, but it ain't Monday, okay? Hey, Mrs. Cassandra, I'm looking for these questions. Okay. I'm sorry to hear that, what the Beck. Beck, oh, that's terrible. Stating that they were roofied at one point in their life. That, oh, that's terrible. I hate to think that anybody doesn't believe anybody that says they were wronged. Mm. Need support. Mm. Wow, that's horrible, Bick. I am sorry to read that in the chat. Okay. And Christopher, long live Zeno? Really? Don't be out ethic. We need to talk, Christopher Mate. We need to talk. Oh my, oh my, oh my. But I appreciate the sentiment, actually. Oh, hey, I'm telling you. You know what, Mrs. Cassandra? Like, I understand, like, a lot of these can be, like, very upsetting in the fact that these it's hard to hear about Scientology poo-pooing the women when they came forward. That's always been the most distressing part for me, that they tried to say how they felt, and they were told, nope, you don't feel like that because it's not possible. You know, Varillion, that went back and forth for a long time. I could see Danny Masterson's lawyers throwing objection bingo to the toxology testimony. Absolutely. Because the Judge Almeida, though, and I don't know how you guys feel about these, but for me, I think that is actually very pertinent, that they're allowed someone who actually understands how that happens commonly in these type of situations, and these are all the symptoms and the signs, and this can affect memory. That's all very pertinent, and it wasn't allowed in the first testimony. This is big, and I can see that Philip Cohen does have a hard road to go, but you know he's the objection king, right, Brilliant? I mean, we heard like objection, objection, like objection, like he's gonna make it difficult, okay? But they're allowed to speak on their common knowledge of it. Now, just that term there, just think of what that means, the common knowledge of it, meaning in the police department, they hear about it more often than not. And this is their experience on it, and they're allowed to say so. That's a wide berth. In I don't know. To me, I think it's pertinent to the whole picture. I really do. Oh, and Beck, I am just yeah, they just I do. Um, if I'm missing questions from prior and you want me to answer it, please put it in again, because I can see now that StreamYard is not really um mm, not really helping me out here. Hmm. You know what, Neil? I see that you just said ruckus. There's a word I haven't heard in a long time. You know what? I like that word, ruckus. I like that word, ruckus, shenanigans. All of that. There's a lot of that going on in these trials. I'll tell you what. Hoopla. Bring all those words back. Like, let me tell you, all you have to do is hear what goes on between Mueller and Cohen when they're up there at that sidebar, which we don't even get to know about with the judge. I'm saying hoopla, raucous shenanigans. Like, they're the best at it. It's something. Hmm. Okay. Anna reminds us that this isn't the first time Scientology has been accused of grooming women and children. Their policies in regards to their use of women as women being not of the let's just I'm going to try to, Kate, I'm going to try to put this uh, in a simple way, mostly to keep myself calm about it, because I know I've already been talking for an hour and 21 minutes. The last thing you want me to do is get on my soapbox right at the end and go on for another hour, because that particular part I could. Yes, it's true. Scientology has been known, allegedly. Okay, they haven't been on trial for it yet, although there are quite a few lawsuits, a lot of lawsuits. And again, Underground Bunker, Tony Ortega's website. Go look at the other cases. Okay. For trafficking children at such an age, for labor purposes, and unheard of hours, unpaid. Okay. At early age. They do treat children as full grown adults much earlier than we do legally anywhere else. And they are known to treat women as second class citizens. There I said it. They don't have the same rights as the men do. They don't. Reminds me of quite a few other fundamentalists and, wrongful cultish type organizations, or just some freaking idiots who just think that, being a human being doesn't give you essential rights of everything the same as everything else, because apparently owning a certain type of appendage glorifies you in some way. I'm not putting them down. I love that people have that appendage. I love most of the people I know that have that appendage. Okay. Because they're not trying to make me a second class citizen. That's all I'm going to say about it. But just you're right, Anna. They've been known for it, and it's horrible, and it is ingrained in the teachings. And I'm glad that Claire Headley is going to be able to speak on it. I am. They are using their religion to hide the crime, but they want it not to be part of it. You can't hide behind it. Not one. Exactly, Sean. The hypocrisy. It's a serious case, but I found myself just using a little parody to say that. Like, I actually put out a little short on that. Like, two things. One, like, let's not talk about Scientology while it's all about Scientology. I just thought that was ridiculous. And the other one where Philip Cohen actually petitioned the court that he could call Danny Masterson Danny throughout instead of Mr. Masterson, because he wanted to give him a more friendly, affable feel. And Judge Almeida said, I would really prefer if you just call your client Mr. Masterson like you should. Proper. It was hysterical. Can we just call him Danny? I mean, come on. Some of this tickled my funny bone, only because when things are this serious and this tough, and you're trying to wrap your brain around how it can be like this and why people aren't getting the message and why is it still going on, that's what I use to get through. So occasionally I will be doing the off-color joke and comment about it. And I'm glad that you all just know that about me and tolerate it. So it's not that I'm not taking this very seriously. Those of you that know me know I am. Those of you that have heard me speak on it, and I speak on it a lot and loud and long and often, I am. Okay. Jen, I'm not saying it, but I will put it in I bet you get me to say that by the end of the trial. I'll make you a nickel bit on the side, Jen. I'm looking at a comment from like 2 or 3 minutes ago about something you want me to say. I'm not going to put it up, but yeah, you probably will. I'll make you a side bit, and everybody just heard me say it on YouTube, and I honor my bits. Okay, you'll get me to say it live on YouTube eventually. I'm sure I'll be saying it in privately every damn day. Like a lot. Okay, Sean, that's a valid point. If a person is a Satanist and kills someone in a ritual, can they say their religion should not be part of the case? Probably not. Okay, this is why it's so ridiculous when they say, let's not talk about Scientology because it's prejudicial to my client. I'm sorry, your client is a Scientologist. If it's prejudicial to your client, I can't help that, how people feel about Scientology. Maybe you need to talk to Scientology about their reputation, not us. Okay, they're the ones out there doing all that stuff. Okay, making it hard for you to present your client in a certain light, because if he is a Scientologist, there's a certain thing that comes with it. And our opinions about Scientology is part of it. Everyone's. Okay. just like anyone else, okay? And it's not the fact that it's his religion that's the problem. It's the way the teachings affected the women during the incidents, okay? It is not the fact that he is a Scientologist that's prejudicial. It's the acts of Scientology that have to be admitted because they directly affect the case. The women's mindset, how the incidents occurred, what actually set the scenario for the incidents to go so long unreported. All of that is pertinent, and there's nothing that Philip Cohen's going to be able to do about that. That is all pertinent. And yes, Scientology is a religion, but it's always teaching people. It always did interfere. Okay, and I understand what he's trying to say about his First Amendment right to keep his religion out and being prejudiced against it, and I understand that. Well, then you shouldn't actually be telling people that the R word doesn't exist. That's all I got to say. You can't have one and not the other. Okay. You can't do that kind of stuff and affect people that way and not have them speak on it. They are allowed to. And I'm glad that the judge is letting it in and they're allowed to legally now. And that they have the support of other testimony to go with it. This is all big stuff. And you know what the biggest thing I didn't tell you yet is that the trial is not going to be on April 11th, as previously disclosed in my other reporting and all over the media. During this 39-page answer to all of the motions and things bringing forward as far as the previous witness lists and all the testimony and all the objections, Judge Almeida has given them another week. It will be the 17th, I believe. Okay. She has extended it by 6 days. Yep, grooming and that kind of stuff, I do agree always. It does not, you don't really realize it until after the situation is over. And that is true. I mean, that gets reported repeatedly about the flashbacks and, understanding the whole situation much later. Okay. I agree with you, Vermillion, and this happens often. Creating the idea that men are dominant to young boys could be considered a form of indoctrination and behavioral control. Can you say cult? Yes, I agree. I do. Any type of it. Yes. Yep. If the shoe fits, I agree. Yep. Jin, I do agree about that whole red pill kind of stuff. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. Okay, listen. I agree with you, Sleet. There's been lots of cases that come forward where religion is a place where predators have been hiding behind um to get away with things. We've got plenty of organizations that we all know about that I'm not going to speak about now, but it's not an untrue statement what you say, but it is a generalization. But it's not exactly not true. There's plenty of cases out there that could show your point clearly. And it says, using religion to commit crimes you absolutely know are wrong, regardless of the church teachings, is hypocrisy. Exactly. And I don't want to say that every single Scientologist is bad. Of course they're not. It's, I'm not going to use all of the awful words. I will say that everyone that I have spoken with that has come out of it, reports the feeling damaged because of it, and that they do feel wronged. And they do feel it was a wrongful situation. They do feel it's dangerous and damaging. Those are the ones coming out of it and dealing with the consequences of everything that they went through and trying to get their lives back. Well, Sean, we might have to start one of those. Okay, can we get a religion that says women are in charge for once? Well, that would be interesting. Although I don't want one that says anything about one sex being mightier than the other. Yes, there are biological scientific differences that make certain us better in certain instances and not weaker, stronger. There are differences, absolutely, and I acknowledge and support all of them. Okay. But as far as humans, I think that we have more in common on that aspect. As far as equality, I would like to see it. Common sense equality, not put me over and above, not even to the point where the extremists are trying to make everybody pay for everything that was ever done wrong. Um, I want common sense, reality, and a shift in the thinking on it. But hey, those are the bear and her rose-colored glasses. So I don't expect everybody to sign on for that. Okay. All right. Hmm. True. Mm. Sean, and I do that, your thing, Real, about the triggers and everything. I do understand that. And I'd like to just make a small statement on that before I close off for the day. The cases that I cover that deal with things like this, I don't expect people to be able to um deal with it rationally or calmly, especially if it's a trigger for you, especially if it's upsetting. Believe me, I've gone through my own experience with this, just the last trial, to where it got very difficult to try to keep my bias out of it, to try to stop feeling a certain way about certain things, to I had to take a step back and recognize whether it was damaging to me or not. On that, I'd like to say that I expect everyone to let's be responsible for our own mental health and our own well being. If it starts to bother you, please don't be here. Please don't listen. Please don't put yourself through it. I want you all to protect yourselves the best that you can from things that absolutely drag you back there, that absolutely would do anything to set you back on the positive things that you're doing to move forward in any way. Okay. No one has to talk about things they don't want to talk about. Nobody has to deal with everything out in the public any way that they don't want to. And I give you all good grace and absolutely ask that we all just respect ourselves enough to protect our mental health in that way. I don't often give large trigger warnings. I'm not a protector of the public that way. I don't couch my language while talk in the real words. I'll say those words. I will have the conversation. What I'm saying is, like, you just know that about me. I'm not trying intentionally trying to hurt anybody, and I wouldn't in any way. But I do expect us all to protect ourselves that way if it's going to be an issue, you know. I don't want to hurt anyone, but I've got to use the real words to make the real situation what it is, to speak about it in black and white for what it actually is, to have the difficult conversations about the things that happen. And there will be testimony that will be exposed during the trial that's going to say these things. And so that's my disclaimer. I hope I don't have to do it at every single one. But those of you that followed me through the first trial know that we're going to be speaking on it in that way. And I don't do it to hurt a single person. Because, my heart is with you. But I do want to all be adults and have the conversations, including the very difficult, ugly, disgusting conversations that are necessary with a trial like this. Okay. On that, I'm not going to preach because that ain't me. But so that's it. That's Bear for the night. Sorry I kept you so long, but I did want to get all the information out. And again, if I missed anything, if you have a question, do me a favor. Back of the video, put it there. I answer every single question. I answer the comments the best that I can. If it's too personal, hit me up in DMs. I'm okay with that. But I'm all for the conversations be out in the public too. So like, share, comment, do all those YouTubey things. And I'll be back Friday with another case related to the Murdochs. It's they're doing an investigation on Stephen Smith now, the young man who lost his life at 19 years old. It was brought up during the trial. The investigation has been opened. There are no charges or anything yet. It's not a true case yet, but I want to give you a history of why they're talking about it. I thought I got enough questions about it that it would be a pertinent episode for everyone to have, so you have all the evidence, and that you have all of the information that's out there all in one place again. So I'll see you sometime on Friday about that, and shenanigans on the weekend as always. Everybody have a good night, and hit me up with questions if you need them on the back of the video. Thank you for your time tonight and your patience. Have a good one.